At its peak, this company was worth $9 billion. Its founder graced magazine covers as the next Steve Jobs, and its board included 2 former U.S. senators and a former Secretary of State. The technology at the center of all of it never actually worked, not once. This is the story of Theranos and how one 20-year-old dropout convinced some of the smartest people in the world to hand her hundreds of millions of dollars for a machine that couldn't do what she said it could. Elizabeth Holmes enrolled at Stanford in 2002 to study chemical engineering. She idolized Steve Jobs specifically, and it showed. She dropped out at 19 to found Theranos, and from the beginning, she built the aesthetic before she built the product. Black turtlenecks, constant eye contact, and a deep, deliberate speaking voice that former colleagues later said sounded nothing like how she spoke privately. The pitch itself was genuinely compelling. Instead of drawing multiple vials of blood through a needle, Theranos claimed it could run over 200 different tests, everything from cholesterol to cancer markers, using just a few drops from a simple finger prick, processed through a proprietary device called the Edison. Here's the problem. The Edison never worked reliably. Investigators later found that Theranos' own device could only actually perform a small fraction, roughly 12, of the 200 tests it advertised. For the rest, the company was secretly running samples through standard commercial blood analyzers made by companies like Siemens, machines that required the traditional vein draw Theranos claimed to have made obsolete. When employees or outside experts asked how the technology actually worked, Holmes and her team had a reliable answer ready. They couldn't say, because it would reveal trade secrets. That single line did an enormous amount of work protecting the fraud for years. By 2014, Theranos was valued at $9 billion, and Holmes, at just 30 years old, became the youngest self-made female billionaire on paper, with a personal net worth estimated around $4.5 billion. The company partnered with Walgreens to roll out blood testing clinics nationwide, meaning real patients were now getting real diagnoses for conditions including diabetes and cancer, based on results from a machine that frequently didn't work. Some patients received false results that led to misdiagnosis, changing medical decisions based on numbers that were simply wrong. Behind the scenes, running the company day to day was Ramesh Sunny Balwani, who joined in 2009. Balwani had no background in biomedicine or healthcare technology, and employees quickly noticed he didn't understand the science happening in his own labs. What he did bring was a fiery temper that earned him a reputation internally as the company's enforcer, someone who intimidated employees into silence whenever concerns were raised. Holmes and Balwani were also secretly in a relationship, something they deliberately hid from staff and from the company's own board of directors for years. That board, by the way, is worth pausing on because it's part of what made the fraud so durable. Holmes recruited former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, along with 2 former U.S. senators, onto Theranos' board, giving the company a level of institutional credibility that made outside skepticism feel almost unreasonable. Investors like media mogul Rupert Murdoch and the Walton family of Walmart fame poured in money after meetings with Holmes, drawn in by her confidence and the star power surrounding her. Nobody wanted to be the person who doubted the room. The unraveling started in 2015 when Wall Street Journal reporter John Carreyrou received a tip that Theranos was faking its results. He spent months investigating, eventually publishing a series of exposés that laid out in detail exactly how far the technology was from what the company had been claiming publicly for years. The company's foundation, built almost entirely on unverified claims and controlled messaging, started collapsing the moment an outsider with no incentive to stay quiet actually looked closely. Regulatory and legal consequences followed fast after that. Theranos settled with Arizona's Attorney General over misleading advertising, agreeing to repay $4.65 million to customers. In that state alone, federal regulators revoked the company's license to operate its California lab and banned Holmes from running a blood testing business for 2 years. Then, in 2018, the Securities and Exchange Commission charged Holmes and Balwani with what it called a massive fraud, alleging they had raised more than $700 million from investors through years of exaggerated and false claims about the technology, the business, and the company's actual financial performance. The SEC filing was direct. Theranos' own analyzer could perform only 12 of the 200 tests listed on its official patient testing menu. Criminal charges followed. Both Holmes and Balwani were indicted on a dozen federal fraud and conspiracy counts. Their trials, held separately, both ended in conviction. In January 2022, a jury found Holmes guilty on 4 counts of investor fraud. Balwani was later convicted on 12 counts, including 10 counts of wire fraud. In November 2022, Holmes was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. Standing before the judge, she said, "I regret my failings with every cell of my body." The judge's own comment summed up what made the case so unsettling to so many people who'd followed it. He called Holmes brilliant and still couldn't fully explain what had gone wrong. That's really the uncomfortable core of this story. Theranos wasn't undone by a lack of intelligence, either from Holmes or from the people around her. It was propped up by exactly the same ingredients we keep finding in stories like this one. A charismatic founder nobody wanted to question, a board whose prestige substituted for actual technical scrutiny, and a system where saying trade secret was apparently enough to end most conversations before they started. The technology didn't have to work. It just had to look, for long enough, like it might. If you want to see this same pattern play out with actual customer money instead of medical tests, go watch our FTX video next and subscribe if you're into these stories.